1. Smoking. Long before refrigerators or modern preservation technology existed, Native Americans had already mastered an ingenious way to keep their hunted meat from spoiling: smoking. This was not just a simple cooking method but a survival art perfected through generations. They realized that smoke could perform two tasks at once. First, it drew moisture out of the meat, transforming juicy cuts into drier ones that offered fewer opportunities for bacteria to grow. Second, the smoke coated the surface of the meat with natural antibacterial compounds, creating a protective barrier that essentially told harmful microbes to stay away. This powerful combination allowed smoked meat to remain edible for astonishingly long periods, sometimes up to 2 years, a feat even many modern refrigerators cannot achieve. What made this method so impressive was the care with which Native Americans built their smokehouses. Instead of roaring fires that char food quickly, they maintained slow, smoldering flames that produced dense smoke without excessive heat. The key was patience. Meat was allowed to dry slowly, absorbing the smoke over time, resulting in a product that was both flavorful and durable. Different tribes even had their own smoke signatures, based on the types of wood they preferred. Hickory gave a bold aroma, maple added a gentle sweetness, and cedar imparted a distinct forest fragrance. These choices not only influenced taste but also enhanced preservation, turning each batch of smoked meat into a kind of tribal fingerprint. Modern science has confirmed the wisdom of this practice. Studies show that the combination of dehydration and smoke compounds can reduce bacterial growth by as much as 90%. In other words, Native Americans had unknowingly created a preservation system that rivaled, and in some cases surpassed, other methods of their time. With nothing more than firewood, smoke, and patience, they transformed a perishable resource into a long-lasting food supply capable of sustaining entire communities through harsh winters. Smoking meat, therefore, was not only about making food last longer. It was also a testament to human observation of nature and a brilliant example of survival ingenuity. 2. Drying and jerky. If smoking was the large-scale solution for feeding a village, drying meat into jerky was the portable answer for individuals on the move. Native Americans quickly discovered that when meat was sliced into nearly transparent strips and left to dry in the sun or hang in the wind, it hardened into a durable, nutrient-rich food that could last for months. By removing moisture, bacteria and mold lost their breeding ground, while the meat itself retained most of its flavor and nutrition. Modern studies confirm that properly dried jerky can preserve up to 80% of the original nutritional value, a remarkable figure compared to many processed foods today. Tribal hunters were also strategic in selecting which meats worked best for each method. Large animals such as bison or elk were often smoked, as their sheer size made them difficult to consume quickly. Smaller game, such as rabbits or wild turkeys, were ideal candidates for jerky. Their naturally portioned sizes lent themselves perfectly to drying, producing lightweight, easy-to-carry rations. In this way, jerky became the world's first true, travel-sized meal, requiring no artificial preservatives or plastic packaging. Even the environment played a crucial role. Native Americans noticed that windy days dried meat faster, so racks were often placed in breezy areas. Cooler seasons were also preferred, since working next to drying meat under scorching summer sun was both inefficient and unpleasant. To further protect their food, tribes often raised drying racks high above the ground or built them into trees, keeping the meat away from curious animals. These strategies not only maximized preservation but also highlighted a remarkable attention to detail. Jerky, therefore, was far more than a survival snack. It was versatile, eaten straight during hunts, rehydrated into stews, or shared at communal gatherings. For countless generations of hunters and warriors, those chewy strips of meat carried the flavor of the wind and sun, and more importantly, the assurance of nourishment during long journeys. With nothing more than sharp knives, natural sunlight, and accumulated wisdom, Native Americans turned jerky into one of the simplest yet most effective foods of all time. 3. Pemmican. Among all Native American preservation techniques, pemmican stands out as perhaps the most extraordinary. While smoking and drying extended food's shelf life for months, pemmican could last for decades. At first glance, the recipe seemed simple. Pound dried meat into powder, mix it with melted fat, and occasionally add dried berries for extra nutrients and flavor. But behind this simplicity lay generations of experimentation that refined the process into a nearly perfect food system. The classic 50-50 ratio of powdered meat and rendered fat was no accident. Native Americans discovered that this balance created an airtight seal, locking out moisture and oxygen, two of food preservation's worst enemies. The meat provided protein, while the fat offered dense calories, resulting in a compact survival ration capable of sustaining life under extreme conditions. Just 1 pound of pemmican contained roughly 3,500 calories, the energy equivalent of 3 large pizzas, but far more efficient and sustaining. It was, in many ways, the ultimate ancient energy bar. Equally important was pemmican's versatility. Travelers could eat it raw on the trail, boil it into stews, or even stir it into water to create a primitive energy drink. Seasonal variations existed, too. Winter pemmican often included extra fat for warmth, while summer versions contained more berries for vitamins and better taste. Archaeologists have discovered evidence of more than 20 distinct pemmican recipes across different regions, each tailored to seasonal needs or cultural preferences. Beyond survival, pemmican shaped economies and politics. By the 18th and 19th centuries, European traders quickly realized its value. The Hudson's Bay Company reportedly stored tens of thousands of pounds of pemmican at trading posts, transforming it into a commodity as valuable as fur. Its importance was so great that attempts to restrict its trade sparked the Pemmican War, 1814 to 1816, underscoring its role as both sustenance and currency. Today, scientists have confirmed that properly made pemmican can retain its nutritional value for up to 50 years. This astonishing longevity reflects Native Americans' profound understanding of balance, experimentation, and practicality. With no chemicals, no refrigeration, and no modern tools, they created a food that was portable, nourishing, and nearly immortal. Pemmican was more than just survival food. It was a masterstroke of human ingenuity, blending nature's resources with cultural wisdom to produce one of history's most remarkable inventions. 4. Clay pots and fat-sealed storage. Another ingenious preservation method involved sealing cooked meat in clay pots with thick layers of animal fat. At first glance, this seems primitive, but the logic was brilliant. Cooked meat was packed tightly into a clay or bark container, then topped with rendered fat, which hardened into a natural barrier. This fat lid prevented bacteria from entering and kept the meat edible for up to 6 months. In essence, it was the ancient version of a Tupperware container, except it worked better. The vessels themselves were marvels of craftsmanship. Native potters carefully selected specific clays that resisted cracking from temperature changes, often reinforcing them with plant resins or oils for waterproofing. Archaeological evidence shows some pots were treated with natural sealants comparable to modern ceramic glazes, proving that these containers were designed with preservation in mind. They weren't simply storage jars. They were survival tools engineered to safeguard food through long winters. Not all fats worked equally well. Bison and bear fat were particularly prized because of their high melting points, which kept the fat solid even during warmer spring days. This stability created a seal that could reduce bacterial growth by up to 95% compared to unsealed storage. Some tribes took the method further by burying their fat-sealed pots underground, where consistent temperatures between 35 and 45 degrees Fahrenheit acted like a natural refrigerator. Combined with the fat lid, this created a triple lock system of preservation. For many native communities, these methods made the difference between hunger and survival. Historical records describe entire villages enduring harsh winters or hunting shortages thanks to these fat-sealed stores. Traders in the 18th century were astonished to discover meat that tasted as fresh as newly cooked, even after months in storage. This method was not just a clever trick. It was a powerful example of how Native Americans observed, adapted, and maximized every available resource to ensure their community's survival. 5. Underground storage pits. One of the most large-scale and impressive preservation techniques was the construction of underground storage pits. These were no simple holes in the ground. They were carefully engineered food vaults. At depths of 6 to 8 feet, soil maintained a steady temperature around 50 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit, cool enough to significantly slow spoilage. Properly managed pits could preserve hundreds, even thousands of pounds of meat for months at a time. In northern climates, where the ground froze solid, these pits essentially became deep freezers, preserving meat for entire seasons. The process involved meticulous layering. A base of grass or bark prevented meat from touching damp soil. Then alternating layers of meat and insulating materials, often plants with natural antimicrobial properties, were stacked like practical lasagna. Sweetgrass, discovered in some excavated pits, contains compounds that inhibit bacterial growth, highlighting how traditional knowledge aligned with modern science. In colder regions, tribes even layered ice between meat, inventing a primitive chest freezer centuries before electricity. Pit size varied by need and climate. Northern tribes built larger pits to take advantage of extended freezing conditions. Some pits could hold up to 2,000 pounds of meat, roughly the weight of a small car. Management was just as important as construction. Communities appointed designated pit keepers to oversee storage, using wooden markers or codes to track rotation and ensure food was consumed in order. Much like expiration dates today. Of course, storing massive amounts of meat attracted unwanted attention from animals. To deter bears, wolves, or other scavengers, entrances were sealed with heavy stones, camouflaged with vegetation, and sometimes surrounded by plants known to repel wildlife. These strategies minimized risk while protecting the community's vital food supply. Not every pit succeeded. Archaeological evidence suggests about 1 in 10 failed due to flooding, animal intrusion, or faulty sealing. Still, a 90% success rate without modern tools was extraordinary. More than just food storage, these pits reflected Native Americans' deep understanding of environmental factors, soil type, drainage, wind exposure, and their ability to transform challenges into advantages. The underground storage pit was not simply a hole in the ground. It was an engineered system, a prehistoric refrigerator that saved countless lives during times of scarcity. 6. Fermentation. Among native preservation methods, fermentation is perhaps the most surprising to modern tastes. While some today may recoil at the thought of controlled rot, Native Americans understood the science instinctively. By harnessing beneficial bacteria, they prevented harmful microbes from taking over. Fish, especially fatty species like salmon, were ideal candidates. After cleaning, the fish were buried in pits lined with grasses, leaves, or even seaweed, then sealed to create moist, oxygen-limited environments perfect for fermentation. The results were remarkable. Without ever measuring pH, Native Americans learned through experience how to produce safe, stable food. Modern studies of these pits reveal pH levels consistently between 4.2 and 4.8, precisely the range that inhibits pathogens. Coastal tribes enhanced the process by adding seaweed, which provided iodine and minerals that acted as natural preservatives. This was an early form of food science born entirely from observation and trial. Timing was critical. If fermentation ended too soon, the food wasn't safe. Too long, and it spoiled beyond use. Generations refined the craft by relying on sensory cues, smell, color, texture, to determine readiness. Properly fermented fish could last up to a year, sustaining entire families through harsh winters. One Alaskan pit excavation even revealed enough fermented fish to feed 6 people for a whole season. For Native Americans, fermentation was not just about survival. It became part of their food culture. 7. Natural freezing and ice houses. In the frozen landscapes of northern North America, Native Americans turned extreme cold into their greatest ally. Rather than simply tossing meat into snowbanks, They constructed sophisticated ice houses. Blocks of ice cut from lakes and rivers were stacked into shelters, insulated with grass and furs, creating spaces that maintained steady temperatures around 28 degrees Fahrenheit. These ancient freezers preserved meat and fish for months, often more reliably than some modern appliances. But they didn't stop at storage. Freezing became an art. With specialized bone and stone tools sharpened to precision, Native Americans sliced frozen meat and fish into paper-thin strips, sometimes as thin as 1/16 of an inch. These delicate cuts could be eaten immediately, no thawing required, resembling sashimi centuries before the concept reached the Americas. In some tribes, slicing contests became community events, showcasing both skill and cultural pride. Intricately carved ceremonial tools discovered by archaeologists suggest these practices held deep social meaning. They also devised practical frozen meal packs by layering meat and snow in alternating sections, allowing people to remove portions without disturbing the entire stockpile. This foresight mirrors modern portion-controlled packaging. These innovations highlight how Native Americans not only endured harsh winters but actively harnessed nature's cold as a preservation tool. By blending survival necessity with creativity, they turned freezing into both a science and a cultural practice. Their ice houses and slicing techniques reveal a deep mastery of the environment, proof that what might seem like a deadly climate challenge could, with ingenuity, become the key to survival.